right, everyone, this is Fernando for yet another My Movie Review podcast. Well, this is yet another film that I was watching just the other week during the Austin snowstorm. It was a nice revisit from a film that I originally saw in theaters, and I think I saw it one more time later on when it was released, like on DVD. But otherwise, it gave me a chance to stream it the other day, and then I finally get to give my official review here. And of course, as you're seeing here now by the poster, and then also the trailer that's playing. It's the last of the trilogy associated with the Batman Nolan films, otherwise known as The Dark Knight Rises. So let's go ahead and let's do my review here, which unfortunately I must say this movie did not age well and still has a lot of problems associated with it. More on that here in a minute. But yes, The Dark Knight Rises. This is of course the final movie that was in the Nolan verse, the official end of the trilogy. That's how it was touted as for the longest time. I think the tagline for it was "A Legend Ends" or something along those lines. And so everyone knew when it was being hyped up and it was being marketed and set for an official release that this would be it. This would be the last go around for Christian Bale, of course, being Bruce Wayne slash Batman, and then Nolan being the director associated with the film. So there was a huge amount of hype. In fact, the trailer you're looking at now, I remember when it was in theaters. I forgot what movie it played beforehand, but it almost got like a standing ovation. I mean, that's how much hype people had for it whenever it was originally coming out. So all that big buzz, all that epic, I guess, marketing and everything else as far as the attention that it got. And so what happened with the film when it came out is that unfortunately there was pretty much a huge letdown. Like a lot of people were thinking that, well, was this it? Was this pretty much as far as the end of the trilogy? It kind of left things on a sour note, especially with a lot of controversy associated with the film. More on that too here in a minute. First, let me talk about the pros. So, as always, in my movie review podcast, I mentioned the pros, then the cons, and then I'll give my official review, like official type of stars associated with it. So the pros, well, again, it's definitely a Nolan film. It's masterfully made, beautifully choreographed, beautifully cinematography and visuals, and then of course a story that is deep and complex. He's like he can never make just a simple story. It always has to involve multiple layers that I'm guessing people find new things on afterward. And it's always epic. His films are never small. Like in other words, there's big films like the Transformers films, big special effects, laden type films, and then there are epic films, the kind that essentially have you just realizing that you're going to be involved in this whole world from the very beginning all the way until the credits roll. And that's how his movies always feel. So you don't get that letdown here when it comes to this movie. Another pro is the acting. I thought everyone did a pretty good job, especially, of course, Tom Hardy as Bane. I mean, he is not Tom Hardy. He is officially a whole other character in this film. When I was rewatching it, I was thinking to myself, my goodness, he just disappeared into the entire role completely. It's like you're not watching the actor Tom Hardy anymore. You're watching the actual character of Bane itself. It's quite rare and very hard for an actor to do that, where you just completely lose them within the role itself. But he was able to do it here in a really, really good job. It was kind of like what I was highlighting the other day with Wesley Snipes and the way he was able to change his roles, especially when it came to the films like The Fan, Demolition Man, and then also Blade. Three different movies, three different characters, all played by the same actor, but it definitely shows that he is good. That was the case here with Tom Hardy because he absolutely, from the minute he came on board, he did a fantastic job just disappearing into the role, especially with that, of course, imposing mask that he wears and some of the other costumes that you see there too. I thought Anne Hathaway as Catwoman did a decent enough job. Of course, she looks just amazing to look at within the film itself. It would have been a monumentous task to try to eclipse anything as far as Michelle Pfeiffer from the original Batman Returns film, but I think she did a decent enough job. She didn't necessarily do better than Michelle Pfeiffer, but I think she did a fine enough job, and her acting was okay. I thought there was a lot of things involving her subplot that could have been better. Like, how do you go from stealing when it comes to stealing other people's property and then I guess her character had a little bit of remorse afterward, like as you'll see here, whenever the Gothamite elites were taken over, and then she was feeling remorseful about it. So it kind of like seemed contradictory, but it was fine. Christian Bale just pretty much always plays Christian Bale, so I don't really think he did too much of a difference when it came to his acting. But definitely the standout was Tom Hardy. And then as far as the music, it was okay. Like it's Hans Zimmer. I previously praised him within the other film, The Fan. I thought he did such an amazing job there. Here, there's nothing really that stood out. But a pro is, of course, Hans Zimmer always gives it his best, and so there's always you're not going to be disappointed. But here, there wasn't really anything that just stood out. Now let's talk about the cons. Yes, there were some epic that word just came up. There were some epic wrong things associated with this film. Some of it couldn't be helped. Like obviously, there was no continuation on the Joker's storyline from the middle film because of course what happened to Heath Ledger. So there's nothing else that could be done about that. But still, to present Bane all of a sudden as just a ruthless force to be reckoned with, almost unbeatable, almost unstoppable, somehow he was able to infiltrate not just like Wall Street or that version of Wall Street there in Gotham, but also some of the other areas like the construction. I think I saw that too, the police force, if I'm not mistaken. I think also the prisons as well was another thing featured on there. So somehow his little band of roaming thieves, because they're no longer part of the League of Shadows, was able to do all of that undetected, nobody questioning things, and it was all successful. So that took a big leap of faith in order for that to happen. And I think that a lot of it, again, if it was explained better, I think a lot of those plot holes would have been able to work out. Same thing too with, I forget what that guy's name was, but he was the one that played the bad guy in the Star Wars Rogue One film. It was interesting to see him in this film, realizing now, obviously that what but a big role he would have later on in Star Wars. But here he was playing a sub character. But yeah, there was another plot hole as far as him being able to take over Wayne Enterprises and all the funds and assets that they have. All because of the thievery that they did with Wayne's fingerprints. Again, a big, big plot hole associated with that too. Same thing with regards to Bane, like you'll see here, taking over the city with just a few bombs, and then thinking that there's not going to be any repercussions, like the National Guard or the military, airstrikes, anything else like that. Makes you wonder again that a lot of things would happen. And then we just saw Miranda Tate, her character there, and how this big, I guess, I don't know what you call it, fusion reactor, the one that was underneath Gotham itself. I found that to be a huge plot hole. In fact, that was almost more like a Deus Ex Machina, as it's mentioned, because here you have something like that thing somehow being built underneath Gotham, and it quite conveniently can be turned into a nuclear bomb of sorts. So all of a sudden, you have that there at Bane's disposal and at Miranda Tate's disposal, who of course becomes Talia as Ghul afterward, and there they are using it, and it makes you wonder, like, if it wasn't there, what else would they have done? So again, so many things all at once that just seem weird. Plus, I hate to say this, but another big con with the film was that it was boring. There were some parts in there that just dragged, like this part here that you're watching now. I mean, there was not much going on. There was just some simple discussions, and I think there would have been a much better theme if there was editing done to trim scenes here and there. Now, I'm not saying that scenes where that involve known action are just boring in and of itself. No, like the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, that's a fantastic film. It practically takes place in only one main setting, which is the real estate office of the salesmen that are there. But yes, it is so riveting because of the drama, because of the acting, and then because of the very memorable words that are being said by the actors. So here, with The Dark Knight Rises, you had some very boring scenes, just repetitive scenes, scenes that seemed to drag on too long. I felt that this movie should have been split in two. There should have been a part A, and then probably by summer of next year, or maybe even winter, there should have been a part B. That would have in turn allowed even more exposition, but without making the film drag too long. It would have been two films. It would have just been, in my opinion, something far more perfect when it comes to that. I'm wondering if that was ever even the case at the beginning, But who knows? Stuff like this always changes all the time. But yeah, that was another big con as far as that too. Plus, I would have loved to have seen more as far as Robin's character. I think he was probably the most interesting new character on the good guys side, as far as his role and whatever he did on there. But it seemed like there was a big amount of stuff that was happening with him. But then later on in the film, he was just relegated to almost like that school bus service, whatever was happening there in terms of him trying to get all these characters outside of the city. So I would have loved to see more associated with him. And of course, there was that tease at the end as far as what he would become afterward. But otherwise, it was at least a good setup on his part. But a con that we didn't get to see too much of that afterward. But yeah, those are some of the big plot holes, some of the big inconsistencies, some of the boring scenes. To me, what makes things boring is if I'm doing my exercises and the film is not keeping me interested enough. Again, it doesn't have to be action related stuff consistently. No, it just has to be good. It just has to keep me focused. That's what I find most boring, and that's what I think was happening here. Plus, as you can see again in that scene, some of that stuff didn't age well. I was mentioning that earlier, like that whole Occupy Wall Street stuff that was happening within the film itself. Like none now, that's I think that kind of subplot shouldn't have been left in there because it just inevitably, like it's almost 10 years later, it almost created a thing where it's like, oh, that they're discussing that, wasn't that a little while back? Wasn't that 10 years ago? Why is this in the film still? That kind of stuff. So I think that they could have focused on something else as far as Bane just being a pure terrorist or maybe some other type of angle that would have worked best. But overall, I would say I'd give this a close 3 stars, 3 stars out of 5. Compared to the middle film, The Dark Knight, this pales in everything, in every which way whatsoever. And then out of the trilogy, of course, The Dark Knight to me is the best one. I like Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins is growing in popularity on my mind when it comes to its quality and the way it was made and the story. A lot of people actually hold it as the top film within the trilogy itself. I consider it still number two, but as far as this Dark Knight Rises, it's definitely number three, and it's not even close to the other two films. But let me know what you guys think as far as your opinions, as far as your own thoughts, as far as The Dark Knight Rises. Did you catch it in theaters? It seems like a lot of people did, obviously, with the big amount of money that it made. But I would love to see what you guys feel of your opinion. Am I crazy? We're giving it barely 3 stars. Should it be much higher? Or is it true? Boring, repetitive stuff that could have been edited, stuff that could have been removed, and then always big plot holes here and there. Let me know. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always.